So this is our fourth session of Mishle. This is, I think it's what, July 16th, 2014. We have two topics that I highlighted on the sheet tonight, that the same way that I always have done in the past. And some of these you saw last week. Some of these were included in the sheet of last week, and some of them are new, or at least we didn't touch upon them last week. Okay? So at the top you see the power of words, and then you see the outlook of the righteous. These are just headings that I put there to make some sense out of a common theme that they share. But again, it's not something which is set in stone. You might have your own idea about what the theme is. You might think that these things don't really go together. To me, they seem to go together, and that's why I put them together. So let's take the first one and see what it means. See if we can make sense out of it. Okay? The first set, the middle one, we touched upon briefly last time, but we might be able to do more with it. So let's see what we can do today. So the first one is Yesh bote kemadkirot charev. There is one who speaks like the thrust of a sword. Okay? Huh? Somebody blunt, right? It would seem, right? Uleshon chachamim marpeh. But the tongue of the wise brings healing. Okay? So yeah, you're going to be on video. Yeah. That's okay. That's okay. Now I'm going to have to make sure I do my hair and makeup before every session. Anyway, so what does this mean? What is this talking about? Yesh. So there's somebody who talks like the thrust of a sword. What does that mean? And there's but the language of the tongue of the wise brings healing. What does that have to do? What is this really trying to talk about?
Talking gently.
Okay. So what's the comparison, though? Some people can express like the thrust of a sword. Are they talking about the same thing? Or are they talking about the different things? I mean, if we're talking about totally different, some subjects are very painful to hear about, right? And some subjects are very encouraging.
No, but it's comparing the thrust of the sword to healing. So there's a person who speaks and he's out to get you. He's like kind of out to destroy.
How do you know it's he?
Or Christ.
Maybe it's
she.
she.
Just is. But then the other person is trying to help. Like there's two different ways to rebuke people. One is like constructive, and one is destructive.
So how would you characterize the destructive type? What's a destructive? Let's take something let's just make up an example of something we might want to communicate to someone and think, how could we communicate it in a way that's like the thrust of a sword, and how can we do it in a way that's like healing?
So it's like constructive criticism.
Like constructive criticism. Let's take an example. Like,
Be very mean to someone, like, you're really cheap. Or
that's a good example.
Or, you could say, maybe if you were, open with the way you speak, it could be a softer way to
You can do a softer way.
Things to someone.
So I think one of the ideas here is that what does a blunt person think? The mentality of a blunt, certain people are blunt, they're like, I tell it like it is, especially in New York. Right? A lot of people like that. They're blunt. So what is the bluntness? What is that bluntness? Or Israelis also, sometimes they're like that too, right? Right, yeah. So bluntness is a quality that we're familiar with. So what is the characteristic of a blunt person? What?
Very straightforward.
Very straightforward. And what do they think? I'm being honest with you. What do you want me to lie to you? I'm being direct with you. You should thank me. That's what they think. Because in their mind, the content is the only thing that matters. I'm telling you the truth. Don't you want to know the truth? Should I sugarcoat it for you? Or should I tell you the truth? The truth is, you're cheap, or whatever the example was, right? The truth is, you should take a shower more often than once a month, Whatever the criticism is. That's a very blunt way of... What is the blunt person? The blunt person thinks, I'm speaking in the abstract. I'm telling you the truth. Either you accept it or not. You're not going to accept it, well then you're not being honest. It's a matter of honesty. That's what many people think, and that's why they're blunt. Because they say, I'm speaking my mind to your mind. Why do you have to be so sensitive about it? It's the truth. You can't accept it? But the person who has a better understanding of human nature realizes that when you speak to somebody, you don't just speak to their mind, you also speak to their emotions. And the way that you communicate something is oftentimes even more important than the content of what you say. Isn't that true? You can think of it for yourself. If somebody had to give you some feedback that was negative, they could give you feedback that's negative in a very harsh way. You're not good at this, you're not good at that, I don't like this about you, and I don't like that about you, and I never liked it about you, and you're a terrible person. They could say that. And that might all be what they really think. And there might be accuracy in it, okay? But all you're going to feel is the pain of hearing that. You're not even going to really hear the message. You're just going to be feeling the pain of it. But another person who really cares about you and wants to understand you and wants to help you will realize that you're not just an intellect, you're a person, you're a human being. You have emotions. And everything that we hear, we filter through our emotions. So if somebody communicates something to us in a way that seems warm, that seems caring, that is non-confrontational, that sounds like they're empathizing with us, they understand where we're coming from, and that's being gentle, all of a sudden we could hear the same exact points from that person, but instead of being like the thrusting of a sword, it could be a healing. Okay? It can be something that actually helps us to grow because we're able to hear it. So one of the things that I always say to people who are very upset and they want to express their upsetness to someone else is I always say to them, well, the first thing that you should do is ask, what's your objective? What's your objective in talking to them? Because if your objective is just to get it off your chest and you just want to express yourself, you have to ask yourself, well, what's the consequence going to be of that? What's the fallout going to be? What's the reaction going to be? If your goal is that you actually want to help that person improve, then you have to look at it from their vantage point and say to yourself, if I were the person doing this wrong thing, how would I need to hear it to be able to really accept it? You have to be realistic about a wise person is going to look at the total person, the total individual that they're speaking to. Not just give them the content straight. But they have to sugarcoat it. Why do they have to sugarcoat it? Because we're very sensitive creatures. We're emotional. We don't want to hear such bad things. We don't want to hear such bad things at all. But if it's said in a way that's constructive and warm and affirming of us, like they always give you hints of how to convey constructive criticism. You always say something positive first. You always talk about what they really like, what you like about them.
Sandwich method.
Yeah, the sandwich method, is that what it's called?
Nice.
You start nice, you give them a little bit of I remember I once talked to a rabbi who is much old. Where is that from?
What, the sandwich method?
Yeah.
I don't know, I always hear it.
Oh, okay. It makes sense. I like that, but I never heard that before. The sandwich method. You start out by saying something nice about the person, then you tell them the criticism, then you end with very nice things. I knew a rabbi who told me that he was an educator, a principal, much, much older than me. I mean, he's still alive, but he's well past retirement age now. But he once said that he could fire a teacher and they'd be thanking him when they left. Because he knew how to express it to them in such a constructive, positive way that seemed like he cared about them, that they would leave thanking him for firing them so they could go find themselves and, build themselves up or something like that. Now that level, we can't all do, maybe. But the idea here, right, the theme here is that the way we convey things is oftentimes even more important, as important or more important than the content that we convey. Okay? And we see the same thing in the third. The third saying is similar to that. Not exactly the same, but similar. Ma'anerach yeshivchema, udvar etzev yale'af. That means that a soft response will turn away anger, but a painful word provokes anger. What does that mean? So the first one is a response, right? A soft response will turn away anger. And a painful word can provoke anger. What's it trying to say? Someone's angry. What does a soft response mean?
Think of it with like kids, like emotional coaching. Like, I hate my teacher. Something goes on today.
Right.
Or, oh, can't say that. It's not nice to hate your teacher.
The old school way of doing it. You don't really mean you hate your teacher. You have to love your teacher. That type of thing.
Or like the emotional coaching of, oh, you seem so upset. Like, what happened? Did something happen with your teacher today? Like typical parenting. Like,
The parenting skills that they teach you.
yeah.
Yeah. No, that's the right way. That's what they teach you. There's famous books written about that. Yeah, you're right. So rach is soft. Soft response. What is soft?
Being more of a listener, not saying so much. When people come to you and they're angry, just let them vent, let them...
And we also don't, it
go
sounds like as the
beat them
person's
right after.
angry at you, right?
Yeah, if someone like...
Right, 'cause you're
if
responding to them.
angry, if you say anything back to them, it'll just make them angrier.
Well, what is soft? What is a soft material like?
Absorbs.
Yeah, it absorbs, right? If you push into something soft, it moves, right? It doesn't stand firm, right? It absorbs a blow. So when somebody's angry, if you fight fire with fire and you yell back at them, what's going to happen? It's just going to escalate. It has to escalate. That's the nature. In fact, not only will it escalate, but even saying something painful to somebody can create anger. That's the end of it. That even where there wasn't any anger, you could be having a discussion with somebody where there wasn't any anger, but you decided to phrase whatever you said in a way that really you could have known would really insult the other person, or that they would take it personally, or they would get upset by it. And so that ends up derailing the whole conversation. We've all had that, right? Everyone here has been in a discussion, or let's say a debate or an argument, where you expressed yourself in a way that put the other person down, or they perceived it as putting them down, and all of a sudden, the topic is forgotten. What the original topic of the discussion was is forgotten now. You lost it, and it becomes about that issue, what you just said about them. What did you just say about me? What do you mean? Why did you say that I'm this? Why did you say I'm that way? So, Dvar etzev yale'af means that if even in a conversation that is not necessarily an angry one, it's not one that has a lot of passion flaming in it, you can say one thing that the other person takes personally and create anger. So they say, for example, like one of the skills, they're talking about parenting skills, but also skills in relationships that they say, is avoid you statements. Did they teach you that also?
Oh,
Avoid you statements, always use I statements. Right? I feel a little bit left out here. Not, you're leaving me out all the time. Why do you always leave me out? No. I'm feeling a little bit left out. Oh, well, that makes the person, when you hear that, right? If I come up to you and I say, you're always leaving me out. So then you feel what?
Attack.
You're attacked. And what do you have to do? Defend yourself. No, I didn't. What are you talking about? I always try to call you. You become defensive. But if I come and say, I'm feeling very left out now. So what's your response? Oh, what can I do to help you? Right? Instead of defending yourself, all of a sudden you say, oh, well, what can I do to make you feel more included? Was there something that you missed? Oh, how can we get you involved next time? So the way that you present something when someone's upset, first of all, when you're upset, the way that you present it can either cause the other person to become very defensive and angry, or it can cause them to want to help you. It really depends. I'll tell you a story from my life. This was a long time ago. This is not a very interesting story, but it's worth repeating. I almost forgot about it. This is probably 20 years ago maybe. Anyway, I moved into an apartment, and I thought I had arranged for there to be, this was before cell phones were very, everyone had a cell phone, only doctors had them, and we had beepers, and we thought that was cool. So, but in those days, you needed a phone in your house. Nowadays, we don't even really think that much about it except for the internet service. We're more concerned about internet than about phone. But back then, it was more about your phone. So I was moving into this apartment, and I thought everything was set with the phone, and I called up the phone company, and they said, oh, well, I'm sorry, it's going to take us 2 or 3 weeks or something like that to come. And I was so upset, and I said, what are you talking about? I told you before, and I gave you, I called in advance, and I started giving them, all of my stress and all of my angst was unloaded on this poor, I think it was probably a woman, I don't remember, on the other side of the phone. And she's like, well, I'm sorry, that's it. We're going to schedule it for 2 weeks or 3 weeks or whatever. Goodbye. And I said, oh, I'm really being stupid here. When you call the phone company, you never get the same person twice, right? So I said, I'm going to try again. So I picked up the phone again. I called back the phone company. And this lady answered, and I said, I understand you guys are really overwhelmed over there. You have a lot of scheduling, but, I just moved into this apartment. I'm really worried. They weren't able to schedule me on time, and I'm really concerned. I'm not going to have a phone, for 2 or 3 weeks, and what can I do? And they said, you know what? Don't worry. We're going to schedule it, very quickly. 2 or 3 days, it'll be done. So the way that you present it, I had forgotten that story, but it's a true story. The way that you present something really makes all the difference. When you come attacking the person, why did you not do this? When you complain at customer service and you take an aggressive approach, then they feel defensive and they're less inclined to help you unless they have to, unless they're going to get fired or something. Whereas when you take an approach that invites them to be helpful and feel good about themselves, they're more likely to want to be your friend and want to help you. It's human nature. That's exactly what it says. And the same, whether you're on the receiving end or the giving end. So when you're on the receiving end, ma'aneh rach yashiv chema. If you want to turn away somebody who's angry, believe me. We've all been in this, situation of somebody getting angry with us, yelling and screaming at us. They might be right. They might be wrong. We might have done something wrong. It might be a misunderstanding. Whatever it is, we've all been in that situation. And sometimes we try to fight back, and it doesn't work. It never works. But what I've learned from having been in that position many, many, many times is the more angry another person gets, the more calm I get. Because the only way to be able to deal with somebody who's really angry is to try to de-escalate. Let them get it off their chest, let them express everything that they need to express, hear them out, and then try to respond almost like you are their psychologist. Almost like you are taking a parental role. Because they're in the grip of this emotion. They're not even focusing on what you're saying or doing. Really, they're totally in their own world right now. So you just have to try to allow them to simmer down and calm down, and then come back to rationality and come back to let their faculties return. That's the only thing you can do. And that's exactly what Mishle is saying. If you take the brunt of it, in other words, you absorb it, don't think right now about the fact that they're saying a lot of mean things about you and you might be insulted. Just right now, put it aside. Later on, they'll probably come back and apologize. Let them get it out of their system. Because right now, you're not going to accomplish anything. It's better to just absorb the brunt of it. And don't say something when you're trying to make a point that specifically inflames the upsetness of somebody else, which people do sometimes. They specifically throw in a word, a phrase, an insinuation, they imply something about the other person in the conversation that all of a sudden makes it into a fight instead of a discussion. Happens all the time. So that's what Shlomo Melech is saying. That's what Mishle is saying. What? Everybody can relate to this, right? Pretty much. So I'm going to, because we touched on that middle sentence last time, I'm going to leave it for the end if we have time. So that's how we'll do it. So let's go to the next little section there. And I find this very interesting. It says, "Ve'orach tzadikim ke'or noga, holech va'or ad nechon hayom." It's a very interesting language in Hebrew. Also, it's a little bit of a unusual structure of the words, but it says, "The path of the righteous is like a radiant light." I'm just reading what it says in the English. "Growing in brightness until it is like the midday sun." Okay, that's a good translation. However, derech rishaim ka'afela, lo yadeu b'mei yikashelu. The path of the wicked is like darkness. They know not in what they stumble. So what's the main metaphor here? What's the main image here? What's the contrast? Dark and light, right? Light. The righteous people have light, and the wicked people are walking in darkness. Right? That's the basic. So that's very nice. If you're a poet and you want to make some kind of a simile or metaphor, what does it mean? What is the difference between darkness and light? Why is darkness and light the best metaphor for trying to distinguish between, let's say, the righteous or the wise person? The righteous and wise are the same in Mishle. Okay? So why is light? What is the difference between darkness and light? When you walk into a dark room, what's the problem? You can't see what's going on. You don't know what's going on. And what will happen if you walk into the room? You could hit something. You could get hurt. You also sometimes will see things that aren't really... You'll think that you see whatever, and it's really not the whatever that you thought it was. It's something else. Because you're in the dark. So you're not able to see. Like there's a story, I don't know if it's a true story, but I remember hearing a story years ago about, a fireman who went into a burning building, and I guess there was a small baby left in the house, and the fireman ran into the house, and in the course of running in the house, he dropped his flashlight, but he made it into the baby's room, and he brought the baby out, or what he thought was a baby, and it was really just a doll. It wasn't the real baby. So when you can't see, you can't identify what's in front of you. You don't know what's going on. So the metaphor of light, wisdom is always compared to light, because wisdom is what lets us see things for what they actually are. And when you don't see things for what they actually are, it's like being in darkness. So it's not just a metaphor like, righteous and light are good, wicked and dark are bad. That's not what it is. It's actually trying to show you what wisdom or what righteousness really does, which is it allows you to see things for what they are instead of having an inability to see things for what they are. Because we see things for how we want to see them. When you're in the dark, you can imagine anything that you want. When we want to recede into a fantasy world, we go into the dark. When we go to the movies is dark. Right? Anytime that we want to get away from actually focusing on our environment, we use the darkness. Darkness is a way to do that. Okay, if you want to tell people scary stories around the campfire or something like that, you wait for nighttime. Nighttime is a spooky time because you can't really see what's going on. You don't really know what's going on. You can't, and then what fills in what's going on when you can't really see what's going on? Your imagination is going to fill it in, right? Your imagination instead of reality. And what happens when we fill things in with our imagination instead of what's really going on? Oh, I don't have an extra one.
Oh, it's okay. It's all right.
Oh, she hasn't.
Here we have one.
Oh, she's good. What happens when you fill in with your imagination instead of what's really going on is what it says at the end of the pasuk. Lo yad'u b'mei kashemo. They don't know what they're tripping on, which is exactly what will happen if you're walking around in the dark. You know why you're supposed to have Shabbat candles? So you don't bump into people and bump into things and trip over things. Even when you eat, if you eat in the dark, psychologically, you get the same nutrients, obviously, in your body, but psychologically, there's something really disturbing about eating in the dark. You don't know what you're eating. Okay? What you're expecting to get into your mouth is not what ends up getting there, right? Because you're in the dark. So, when it comes to darkness and light, really, this is a metaphor that we always use. We say Torah or, right? Ki ner mitzvah Torah or. The Torah is light. What does the Torah's light mean? That means it allows us to see things for what they really are. We come to the world with a whole bunch of preconceived notions, the way we want to believe things are, the way that we're taught by our culture to believe things are, the way that, like things end happily ever after in movies. We know that that's not really true. When a husband and wife or man and woman end up together, that's only the beginning of the process. That's not really the end. Nobody lives happily ever after, and then from then on they had no more problems. Everything was perfect. It's usually the opposite. Things are very idyllic before, and then once they're married, then they have to actually live regular life together. And that's when the struggles come, problems, conflicts, differences of opinion, and whatever other adventures that they have. So the fantasy that our culture gives us is one type of thing, one type of dream, and the reality is very different. And what the Torah does, what many aspects of the Torah are to enlighten us. That's why we use the word enlighten, to give us light, to let us see things for what they really are. A person who believes that, if only I had a lot of money, I would be happy. If only I had a certain amount of food, I would be happy. If only I had a certain type of spouse, I would be happy. All of these things, the Torah helps us put them in perspective. Putting things in perspective means having that light, being able to see things for what they really are, to understand what they're going to be able to give us, to understand what they're not going to be able to give us, to understand how to integrate them. Like, how do we take, let's say, eating and drinking, which is an animalistic activity. All animals do it. We are also part of the animal kingdom. We just are the heads of it, We're in charge of the animal kingdom, but we're part of the animal kingdom. How do we balance that with our spiritual side? How do we integrate them? Barachot is one way, kashrut is one way, right? Sudat mitzvah is one way. So we have many ways of doing that. But that requires looking at food and saying, you know what? Food is not the end of everything. It's not the purpose of my life. Okay? Anything that there's a limit on, anything that there's a restriction on, anything that there's a limit on, is not good in and of itself. Even not working, for example. Shabbat is only one day of the week. We don't say, therefore, not working is good. We should never work. No, we say that it's good to balance. You have to have work, but you also have to have a time to rest from work and to be able to think and to be able to express yourself and take the world in and reconnect with what's really important. So we have the Torah to give us light. It lets us see things in the clearest possible way. In other words, to see things for how they really are. Just like when a light is shining, the more light you have, the clearer you can see. The less light you have, the more difficult it is to see. Or sometimes you miss nuances when there's less light, right? When there's less light in the room, you don't see all of the nuances. As the light fades, you can see less and less, and the shadows let you fill things in with your imagination. And that's the metaphor. The more chokhmah a person has. I'll give you an example. A person who doesn't know anything about how the body works will think, oh, what's wrong with smoking? What's wrong with drinking a lot? I'm sorry if anybody here drinks a lot or smokes, but these are just good examples, right? Or, why should exercise be good for me? Because they don't understand how the body works. So therefore they look at a diet and they say, oh, the Atkins diet sounds like it would be a great diet. Again, I'm not trying to put down any particular diet or promote any particular diet, but they think it just because, for whatever reason. They haven't necessarily studied nutrition. They haven't necessarily studied biology. They haven't necessarily understood how the body works to be able to evaluate it, let's say. And so they think, oh, what's wrong with a little bit of smoking? What's wrong with a lot of alcohol? What's wrong with not exercising? What's wrong? Because they don't really understand the relationship of cause and effect between things. So they don't see the less clearly. They say, ignorance is bliss. Right? I'd rather not know. I don't want to know what the healthy foods are. I don't want to know that eating 7 donuts at Dunkin' Donuts today was bad. It was a bad idea. I'd prefer to think it was a good idea. Your heart knows it was a bad idea. Your arteries know it was a bad idea, but you don't want to know. Right? You'd rather have the lights off. That's having the lights off. Right? Having the light on means seeing things for what they are, but seeing things for what they are means learning about them and knowing and being able to confront the truth and say, you know what, I really need to eat such and such, I really need to avoid such and such, I really need to exercise, and these are all things that I'm just as bad as everyone else here. I'm not trying to say that I don't have my own lapses in these areas. You'll occasionally see me eating things I shouldn't eat and not exercising enough and all that. But the more that you know about the relation, that's why people who go to medical school start getting paranoid, They think that they have every disease. Right? Because they learn too much about how the body works and they start worrying about too many things. That's an extreme. But knowing really what a healthy body requires and how we can have longevity, how we can live a long life and a happy life, is having the lights on. And turning the lights off is saying, I don't want to know. I don't want to know. I'll just wait until I bump into something and fall down. Then, and many times these people will make an excuse. Say, oh, I know a person that smoked 18 packs a day and they lived to be 150. That's an exception to the rule. But if you really understand, and it used to be that they didn't exactly know, that, for example, how smoking caused cancer, but now they know. But you don't want to know that if you're a smoker. You don't want to know that. Leave the lights off. I don't want to see things for how they are. I just want them for how I imagine it to be. And in my imagination, everything in moderation is good. Even using drugs. Okay? It only takes one bad trip, your life is over. I remember when I was studying, because I was studying for my PhD in psychology, and so I went through lots of grad school and lots of case studies of all kinds of things. And one bad LSD trip, your life is over. They don't know how to put you back together after that. People would slip, these, hallucinogenic drugs into people's drinks, and they would start having hallucinations that never ended for the rest of their life. They thought that their body was split in half, or they thought that all kinds of scary things, terrible things. So a person who understands how things really work and the potential of these things to do harm, the light is on, they're not going to touch it. But a person says, a little bit of it can't hurt, a little bit of that can't hurt, a little bit of it. That person has the lights off and is going with their imagination. They're not really seeing things for how they are, and that's how they get into trouble. And of course they say, hindsight is 20/20, right? But it's too late then. in hindsight. So now let's look at the next one. I like the next one. Befe chanef yashchit re'ehu. And maybe you can figure out why I put these together. Okay? But the mouth of the flatterer, or it literally means with his mouth, the flatterer destroys his friend. Uveda'at tzadikim yachalitzu. But with wisdom, the righteous people are saved. Who can tell me how that works? Why does the flatterer... I think flatterers are nice. Doesn't everybody like someone to flatter them? Flattery is nice. They used to say flattery will get you everywhere. Right? Or the other attitude was, flattery will get you nowhere. But which one is it? Flattery sometimes works, right? If you flatter people, you can butter them up, we say, and get somewhere. Why does flattery destroy somebody? I think it feels really nice when people flatter me. It doesn't happen often, that's why.
Each person has their own version of what they want as a compliment.
Mm-hmm.
Like, if I compliment you and I want to compliment another man, what you would want to hear, what someone else would want to hear.
Could be different, right. That's true. But why would it destroy me? How's it going to destroy me? How's it going to hurt me if you compliment me? If you flatter. It could go to my head, that's true.
I was going to say that.
Right, oh, yeah. So, yes.
Also because as Jewish people in this world, we always want to elevate each person. If I tell someone, oh, I love your shirt, and it looks horrible on them, or, oh, you're really looking good, you lost so much weight, but they didn't lose a pound, you're putting mixed judgments in their head, and you're not causing them to continue improving with their lives.
Right, so chanef actually in Hebrew means a flatterer, means it's not true, right?
Yeah.
You're telling a person something that might not be true. So a nice positive feedback could be good because you encourage somebody. But if you're flattering them because you're telling them things that aren't really true, like, oh my gosh, if somebody asks you, did you like this food? Oh, it was amazing. It was so good, and it was horrible. So then you're trying to be nice, but in being nice, next time they're going to make you the same thing again, or it's going to be worse, right?
Yeah.
Potentially. So it's always a fine line because you also don't want to insult somebody and be like, this food is horrible. I'm never coming back here again. You don't want that.
What are you saying that?
That is the hardest question. No rabbi knows the answer to
Your
that.
mom wants to make it, let's say your mom wants to see
Your
it
mom is
like this,
easier.
just so that she knows to make it again or not. But your
Right.
mom is easy.
Your mom is easy. Your mom is not going to,
Some moms might be sensitive.
Listen, I remember, listen, moms can be sensitive, but they forgive. They forgive. I mean, I once said, wow, this korma sabzi is the best. It wasn't my mom's. It's the best. She said, besides yours, Mom. My mom is not going to change her recipe after X number of years, however many years. It's not that when you tell somebody the most difficult thing, and so many advice columnists write about this, and I always read if I see that that's the question because I've never found a perfect answer to what to do. When a spouse, let's say, like your wife or your husband makes food and says, what do you think of it? So on one hand, if it's really disgusting, horrible, you don't want to have it again. If you say it's great, they're going to make it again, and they're not going to. If you say that it's terrible, they're going to be insulted. So what do? It's very difficult to say. Focus on the aspects of the meal that you really liked.
I don't really care if somebody tells me something is horrible.
You don't care?
I don't care.
But it's not nice of the person to do it. That's the problem. Like, it's good that you don't care. It's really, it's the right thing not to care and just be like, okay, this person really doesn't like that.
I like to know the truth. I'd rather somebody tell me the truth than not.
Right, this is disgusting straight up.
Oh, you were making the best meal ever, and you spent 2 hours prepping, and for whatever reason it does taste good to you, it's just,
Right, right, I mean,
No, but see, I feel like
it's a fine line, it's a fine line.
like you don't have to say you liked it. Like you could say, for example, if my aunt made some kind of chicken or something, I could say it didn't taste bad. I usually don't like things so sweet. But
right.
It was great. It was still.
Right, you could say this wasn't my taste, but it was good. It wasn't my style, but it was.
I don't like.
But it depends on how you say it, right? Right. You can take it onto yourself and say, this just isn't my type of thing. Like I don't. There's certain foods I don't like that much. So you can just say, it's just not right. As long as you're not you're not insulting them. It's like, I don't really like. Right. You don't have to tell them. You don't have to.
Say you're sitting at the table and
Right. No, you would never do that. You might take them aside and say, I think you forgot this. You might have forgotten salt. You might have put a little bit too much salt in. Or something like that. If it's like an issue of a mistake, sometimes they put in too much salt. They added salt twice or something like that by accident, or they forgot an ingredient. It happens. So that you can point out in a nice way. They won't take it as big of an insult.
I feel like that's a lot of it. Like put it on yourself.
Right. Or you could say I thought, it was a little bit too salty for me.
I would usually make it this way.
Right. I would. Or hey, I know a recipe for this that's a little bit different. I'd like to share with you. Or something like that. You can think of a way to do it it's a tough one. It's not an easy one.
False flattery is considered what? What is it considered?
It's one of the things we're not. I mean, a lot of times in the Tanakh, even in Tehillim, it mentions somebody who's a chanef, who's flattering people is not doesn't find favor in Hashem's eyes. It's something considered bad. It's considered very bad.
Torah characters who ever considered a chanef?
You think who would be considered one?
Flattery maybe is the best direct translation for it, because I don't necessarily affiliate flattery as a negative thing.
Right.
Well,
Here, that's what it means.
A
Yeah.
negative thing, but
Right.
flattery may not be the best.
It's more like
Right.
translation.
It's a different.
A compliment that's a lie.
Right.
Like, praise.
Right. I think flattery, right, in English, flattery might not be a perfect translation because sometimes we mean flattering somebody and we really mean it. We're just saying it too much. Like we think of flattery as saying it too much, like overdoing the compliments, whereas in Hebrew, the sense is more like telling people positive things that aren't true about themselves in order to make them feel good about themselves. Like what's that Aesop's fable where the bird is holding doesn't the fox comes and tells the bird, you crow, you have a beautiful voice, I want to hear you sing, you have such a beautiful voice. And then the bird's like, no, the bird's holding this food in the mouth, said, I heard you sing, and of course crows sound terrible, but that's, but he says, I want to hear you sing, I want to hear you sing, and she starts singing, of course the food falls, he takes the food, and
I think in our generation
Yeah.
now,
What?
Sorry, go back to the crow.
Yeah.
I think
It's not a real story.
in our generation, this has become like the biggest thing, because nowadays you don't just see flattery in saying someone looks good in person. Someone could put a profile picture up of like a blurry picture from 1998, and everyone could be commenting, no.
I know. You know what my favorite thing is? When they do the doppelganger.
Yeah.
Okay, this is the funniest thing. The doppelganger weekend Facebook where you're supposed to put a lookalike of yourself on? Every girl who puts anyone, every person who comments says, you're much better looking than this person. No matter whether it's true or not.
Yeah.
Everybody says that. Oh yeah, she looks like you, but you're much more beautiful. Everyone you have to say that.
Or like, you're the most beautiful bride I've ever seen.
Right, that I've ever seen. That's nice to say. You're supposed to. It's a mitzvah to say that, though. It's a mitzvah to say that. Misameach, chatam. Except according to Beit Shammai. Beit Shammai says you don't say anything. You say you're the nicest. You have the nicest personality of any bride that I've ever met. That's.
Don't get wild.
It could be true. She had to work more on the personality because. Yeah, but listen, all brides are beautiful on their wedding day. Okay, so anyway, so you destroy the person. Why? Because you cause them to overestimate, right? To overestimate the qualities that they have, to overestimate themselves, exactly like you said. That if you tell them, you're looking really good, and they really look bad. So then you're not helping them. Maybe you could help them to be more presentable. If you tell them, you're a great cook and they're a horrible cook, then you're giving them, instead of trying to steer them in a direction that could be more constructive, you're just making them feel great about themselves, and that great is an empty greatness. It's like a lot of times in schools, they emphasize so much that children's self-esteem. So they could do something that's absolute garbage, and oh, this is wonderful, this is the best, this is great, this is perfect, everything that you do is perfect, and they just want to build self-esteem. So that was like the previous generation. So 2 generations ago, it was, either you actually do good work or it's no good. Then it became, no, we don't care about the quality of the work. Whatever kids do is great because we just want to make them feel good about themselves because then they're going to succeed in the world. And then when those kids went out in the world and thought that everything was coming to them because they were so great and they could never do anything wrong, and they all failed in everything that they tried to do because they assumed that they already had everything under their belt because they were so wonderful, because that's what they were told their whole life, then they realized, wait a second, we better balance this out. Right? We don't want to destroy somebody's self-esteem and make them feel horrible, but we also don't want to encourage them and make them think that they're great at things that they're not great at. Because then we're just giving them high expectations about the world, or high expectations about what they're going to be able to achieve, or a low expectation from themselves about what they need to work on. But if we tell them honestly, when you have a good friend has a nice way, of course, of honestly giving you an evaluation so that you can become stronger. That's why it says, Uveda'at tzadikim yachalitzu. That actually, the word yachalitzu, the translation is not so good. Because yachalitzu actually means to become stronger. Like, Ritzeva hachalitzenu b'yom HaShabbat. On Shabbat we say, Hashem, strengthen us on this Shabbat. So, the tzaddik becomes stronger with knowledge. In other words, what you really do to strengthen a person, if you tell them you're great, all you're strengthening for that moment is their sense of feeling good about themselves. But it's really empty. It's not based on anything. You just pump them up with emptiness, because by flattering them, they're going to be nicer to you. They're going to do a favor for you. They're going to be more friendly towards you because you made them feel good about themselves. It works. Right? But you're not really helping the person, you're helping yourself. If you want to help somebody, you don't want everyone to tell you that you're great. You actually want to feel the need to become great. And that's a lot harder. Okay? It's easier just to get nice compliments from people, especially on Facebook.
But it's not saying how to make somebody stronger. It's not saying that.
It says,
I don't understand what he's trying to say.
Okay.
With wisdom, the righteous are made stronger.
Well, it's describing the difference between when you give somebody false compliments, false feedback about how great they are. Wow, that was the greatest, if somebody tells me, that was the greatest speech I ever heard when I give a speech on Shabbat. Like, that might make me feel good for a second, but it doesn't point out anything that I can work on to improve, let's say. So you can destroy a person because basically they think that they're up here and really they're down here. Whereas for the tzaddikim, they want knowledge. Knowledge is how they actually become strong, because then they're not dependent. Think also of this. The person who gets a lot of flattery and compliments, they become addicted to that, right? Because one person gives them really a compliment, and then they need to find it from another person. They need to find it from another person. Why do they always need to find it from somebody? Because inside, they really don't have that, right? Right. They have an ego, but it's an ego that's dependent on what other people are telling them because they don't really have the substance, right? So not only are they not going to build themselves up, you're hurting them by making them think they're more competent than they really are, and they're stronger than they really are by telling them all those things. But it's not only that. It's also that they become addicted to the flattery because they don't really have those good qualities to be proud of. So when they look inside themselves, they don't see it. They need you to tell them again and again and again. Whereas the tzaddik, who looks for the truth about himself or herself, doesn't want to hear flattery of people, doesn't want to hear people telling them they're so great if they're not. They want to have an honest assessment of themselves, and then they can really become stronger. Then they can really build up. And they won't need the flattery of other people to feel good about themselves, which is something very unfortunately that, we can make children or other people very dependent on our constant, people go fishing for compliments, right? People sometimes they'll say something and they want you to give them a compliment.
Oh yeah, I hate
People do. Well, we don't hate anybody.
No, I don't hate people.
We
I hate when people do
We hate when people do that. Okay, that's nicer. Okay, so that's nicer. So yeah, it's not a good thing to do, but I see that and I feel bad for the person, because that means that they're addicted to that feeling of having people say nice things about them because they don't have it inside themselves. They don't have the confidence inside themselves. Now, we can't all be a 10 in every single department, right? We can't. So we have to look at ourselves honestly. I remember one time that years ago, many years ago also, that I was talking to a mother about her children. I was probably like a late teenager, maybe I was 20. And I was saying to her, all of your children are great, and your daughter is wonderful, and she's amazing, whatever I was saying. And the mother stopped me, and she's like, listen, stop. I know what's good and bad about all of my kids. And I know you're not telling me the truth, I know their strengths and weaknesses, right? The mom was really blunt. She was Israeli. She was very blunt. She just said straight out, listen, don't tell me this. I know the reality about my kids. Some of them have this strength, some of them have another one. They all have what to work on. She knew the reality. And that's really a gift. It's a gift to know where you really stand, what you have going for you, what you don't have going for you, so you can build up. Right? So you can become better. But if somebody is giving you a false sense of yourself, a false sense of who you are, like I once heard somebody say, this is something especially for women. I once heard somebody say, and I don't know if it's true, but they were talking to this pickup artist. Okay? Yeah. You should all know this. This is good wisdom for life. Okay? He said, listen, I put all girls in two categories. There are smart girls and there are pretty girls. Okay? He said, when you see a pretty girl, compliment her about her intelligence. And when you see a girl who's smart, compliment her on her beauty, and you'll have her. That fits perfectly with this, doesn't it? In other words, yeah, because that's the area that maybe she feels more self-conscious about. She feels weaker in. And you're giving her a feeling that she's really good in that area. So maybe people didn't usually tell her. The girl that's pretty, everybody might be telling her that. But they're not telling her how smart she is. Oh, so I'm going to go for that. And then I'm going to make her feel good in an area that she hasn't been made to feel good. And that's how I'm going to get her attention. And so too the other way around. So this connects to this question as well. We have to be careful about when people are telling us things. I'll conclude with one more story. I know I have all these stories tonight. I don't know why. But this is my favorite story ever. I don't think I told you this story. Stop me if I did. Did I ever tell you the story about the guy who came to collect tzedakah? And he was talking about Syrians. Did I ever tell you this? No. Okay. So he comes to my office and he says, for some reason, they're all Israeli, so they're speaking Hebrew, but I'm going to speak to you in English. So he says, he's talking me up the whole time about Syrians. I don't know why. He knew I was from New York. This was in Washington, D.C. He says, the Syrians are so religious, they're such tzaddikim, they're so strong in mitzvot, I have a chavruta is Syrian, and my rabbi is Syrian. I'm like, okay, I don't know why he keeps going back to this, At the end, so I gave him a check, because that's what I'm supposed to do, It had a discretionary fund of the synagogue I was supposed to give him. And I was walking out, he said to me, so, what Syrian background are you? And I said, I'm not Syrian, I'm Persian. He's like, oh, you're Persian. Oh, I have another chavruta that's Persian, and I have this rabbi's Persian, and my son-in-law is a Persian, and this Persian. I said, okay, that's very nice. He said, can I have more money now?
Oh my God.
He actually said that. Can I have more money now? I said, no. Too late. You should have tried that before. It wouldn't have worked then either, but he actually it didn't work because he said what he was doing. You understand what I mean? Like, if you're a good flatterer, you don't say, now give me more money. You let it happen, But it was already after the fact. I already gave him the check, so it was too late. So anyway, that's an example of flattery backfiring. Or at least not working. But this is what Mishle is telling us, that we should be on guard from people who start telling us all kinds of positive things about ourselves. They might be trying to get something out of us, or they might be distracting us, pumping us up, and causing us to lose perspective on who we really are and what we really need to work on to improve ourselves. So knowledge and wisdom and the truth is always the best way to go. Going with the lights on, not with the lights off in life is the best way to go. And that's really the lesson of Mishle. So we had said we're going to conclude Mishle for now. We may one day come back to it. I think that would be great. There's so much more to do.